Finally, we're going to take a look at one last thing. So far we've been just messing around with the value a. What happens when it's negative? What happens if it's positive? What if you make the absolute value bigger or smaller? How does it change the graph? And we've been pretty much ignoring b and c. So one last thing we're going to do, and then we'll save the rest for another day, is let's take a look at c. What happens when you change this number? So b of x, or not b of x, but b times x, we're just going to still ignore that. And we're going to focus on what happens when we change this number. So after you copy this down, let's go ahead and take a look at our graph. Our standard function, let's just leave our parent graph there, x squared, so 1x squared, but b, we're still going to keep it 0, so basically get rid of it. But now we're going to have c. And so if I first take my parent graph and graph it, which is right there, and now let's say I change c to, I don't know, 4, and I add that graph. Notice what happens to our graph. In fact, I better zoom out so you can see things a little better here. Take a look. If I change it to x squared plus 10. Oop, I lost the other graph. Hold on a sec. Let's put this back and then change this to 10, but add it. Again, notice our graphs. Here's the bottommost one is just our parent graph, x squared. Our next one up, x squared plus 4, and then one up after that, x squared plus 10. Now what if I change these to negatives? Let's get rid of this one, let's take our parent graph again, and let's say we made c a negative number, so x squared minus 1. Notice how the graph shifts. Whoops, sorry guys, I keep doing this. There's our parent graph, minus 1, add it. Let's add another one, x squared minus 7. And let's put this one back in. Okay. Sorry about that, I keep hitting the wrong buttons. So here, our parent graph is this uppermost one. Then when we put x squared minus 1, notice that graph right below it. And then x squared minus 7, it's this bottommost graph here. But notice how the shape of the parabola doesn't really change. It just shifts up and down. Well, it turns out that connection holds true for everything. Turns out that if you start changing c to either larger or smaller numbers, here's the result. That as you make c positive, it shifts the graph upwards, whereas negative values of c shift the graph downwards. So you can actually change the location of your parabola up or down based on how you change c. And so you can again predict what graphs would be higher or lower than others. Alright, so this will be the last part of the notes. Just go ahead and copy that down. So mainly what we've learned in all these videos is that mainly a is a key number to pay attention to. If I go back several slides, we can take a look here and once again kind of summarize what we've learned. That we have one, that when a is a positive number, we know we're going to get an upwards opening parabola. When a is negative, it's a downwards opening parabola. Along with that, when we actually graph it, we know that parabolas are symmetrical and they have a line of symmetry in the middle and that they have a vertex at that point where direction shifts. So downwards, then upwards, or upwards and downwards. That point on the line of symmetry is called the vertex, and it's either a minimum or a maximum, whether that, depending on if that parabola is upwards opening, like here, so it's the minimum, the lowest most point our vertex will get, or a maximum, it's the highest our graph will ever get. And then we also learned about how if you take a look at the absolute value of that value a, If it's a larger number, we get a more narrow graph, or if it's smaller, we get a wider graph. And then finally, we played around with the variable c a little bit and learned that if we shift that number either to positive values or negative values, that creates a graph that either shifts upwards or downwards. Alright, so what you're going to do is you're going to take all this information and you're going to put it towards doing the assignment today to learn a little bit more about what things we can and cannot predict about these quadratic functions, which make these parabolic graphs.